Over the last 2 years, I have been releasing music under the moniker of Kayo. Especially in the last year, I have released almost exclusively with lo-fi labels. Now, these labels work slightly differently to labels that you might think of when you think about musicians and artists. A lot of these aren't major labels in the sense, and it's just kind of a different process when using labels such as this. So I thought I'd make this video to talk about whether I think it's worth releasing lo-fi music with lo-fi labels, especially smaller ones, as that's my experience in 2023 and going into 2024. Now, the simple answer to this is that it's complicated. It really depends what it is that you want to get out of your release. Now, a lot of these labels will help you. A lot of these labels will do things for you. So I thought I would just lay out kind of the pros and the cons as far as I see them to possibly help you make a judgment on whether you want to release independently or whether you want to release with labels. Now, let me just go ahead and say that I consider myself a small artist. At the time of recording this video, I have, I think, just under 40,000 monthly listeners, and I've just hit 1 million streams on Spotify, but I am definitely considered a smaller artist, and I do consider myself still an independent artist. So take with that what you want and take from this video what you want, but I hope it helps you in kind of thinking about your decisions and thinking about what you're going to do with your music, especially if this is your first couple of releases or if you've never released with a label before. So like I said, it really depends what it is that you want to get out of your release and whether you think these labels can help you. Here is a couple of the pros that I see of releasing with a lo-fi label. The first one, and this is probably the biggest one I find, it's kind of like an opportunity to network. Through releasing with a label, you'll usually find that they have a Discord, they'll have an Instagram page that's usually pretty active, and on those pages and in those Discords you can find other artists that either do release with this label, so you could ask them for their opinion, or you could find other artists that like this label. And a lot of these Discords will have pages for you to meet and collaborate with other artists. They will have pages where they run competitions and things where you can submit your music to these competitions and release with the label or with other artists that they have on the label. So I actually think that releasing through a label gives you a really great opportunity to meet other artists that are in the same space as you. You might find other like-minded artists that you really like and kind of gel with, and then you can either release independently with them or even just make some friends. The second thing that I really like about releasing with labels is that before you even release your music, you get this kind of buy-in from someone else saying, I like this song enough to help you release it or to distribute it or to put it on the label or on a playlist, whatever. You know, you've written something, you've produced something that you really like, and you are kind of giving it a test run and you're sending it out. It's a little bit of a confidence boost in what you've made. It's a little bit of a boost in kind of you believing because someone else has believed in the song enough to help you release it. And I find that is something I really value, and especially when I first released with a label, I thought that was just really cool to get that buy-in before you've even released it. The next thing we're going to talk about is probably the biggest part of releasing with a label. It's the thing that all the labels will promise you, and that is that they will add your music to their playlists. Almost all of these labels will have playlists on Spotify, they might have playlists on Apple Music, wherever. When they release your track, most of the time it will go to the top of their playlist as it's their newest release. Most of the time these labels will keep your track in their playlist for at least a little while. A lot of these playlists do have some traction, you'll get some decent plays from them. Are they going to get you hundreds of thousands of plays? Probably not, but are they going to get you a couple of hundred? And if you're just starting out, that couple of hundred can be really great, and that's absolutely nothing to shy away from. But not only will they put you in their playlists, a lot of these labels will also submit your tracks to their friends' playlists. They might have networks and links with other labels, they'll get it in their playlists. Some of them will also help you out with Submit Hub and daily playlists and submitting your music to playlist curators. And if there's one thing we know about lo-fi music is that it's playlist driven, so the more playlists you're in, the better. Another pro of releasing with labels is that they will promote your music on their socials. On release day, they'll probably post something about it. What you might also find is that if they really like the track, is that over time, every now and again, they'll kind of repost it, or they'll put like a little link or something in their story about your track or your album. So that's a nice little bonus. The final thing that I actually think is really cool when releasing with labels is that they'll generally have some sort of a team. They'll have somebody that you speak to. They might also have link with like an artist or someone who does their artwork for them. If you're not an illustrator or if you're not an artist, you can lean on their artist to make you some really cool artwork. I'm somebody that still really values a lovely artwork, and I think that goes hand in hand with the music. If you have a really great artwork, it looks better on your Spotify page, it looks better everywhere. So you can kind of work with their in-house artists to get some really cool artwork for your track or artwork for your album. And another thing that some of these labels will do is help you write pitches to Spotify for their editorial playlists. Now, I don't believe that anyone can guarantee you're going to get in an editorial playlist. I've been added to, I think, 4 or 5 editorial playlists in the last 2 years, and only one of those is through a label, and it was a very small label, but I don't think anyone can guarantee it. But what they will do is help out, and they might have some anecdotal evidence of getting in playlists before, and they might go down a similar route when pitching your track. So it's not necessarily you have a higher chance, but it just maybe is something that might help you out. So now let's have a little talk about what I consider to be the cons or the negatives to releasing with a label. The first one, the big one, is that you have to split your revenue. Most labels will take somewhere between 30 to 50%. Some labels might have a clause to say that they'll make the first 50 quid and then split after that or whatever. I really wouldn't enter into an agreement without reading that, because I know there is definitely some labels out there that expect the song to pay them in the thousands of pounds before you're going to see any revenue. If you're a smaller artist like me, you're not really thinking about the revenue too much, but if your song does get picked up by an editorial playlist, if your song does kind of go viral or blow up, then that revenue is going to start adding up. I've had one song that's done close to 1 million streams completely independently, and that song has made well over a few £1,000s. If you had to split that 50-50, you're losing a big chunk of that. So that's the biggest, by far the biggest con of releasing with a label. The second thing that I see as the biggest con when releasing with labels is that you have to release on their timeline. You know, you might pitch a song to them, but they don't have any available slots for 3 months or 4 months, and then you kind of just have to sit and wait for that song to come out. 3 or 4 months is quite a long time. That's not to say that all labels are going to have a 3 or 4 month delay. Some labels will probably be happy to release with you in a couple of weeks. It really depends on the label. The smaller labels are much more flexible in when they can release with you. So I think that's pretty much it for the pros and cons. I will say, I mean, I've released with many different labels. This year, I think I've released with a label every single month since March. So that's almost a whole year of releasing exclusively with labels. I still do it. I think it's really beneficial. I'm meeting really lovely, great people through these labels, and I just think it's a really cool thing. I'm still building my brand. I think if I ever got to a position where I was pulling in hundreds of thousands of streams on my own without a label, I would probably then release independently just because of the revenue split. For now, that's not the situation. For now, when I release music independently, it does significantly worse than with labels, because you've got the buy-in, you've got the playlists, you've got the promo on socials, but that also means that you're reaching their audience as well as your own. Now, I haven't released independently for nearly a year, so my view of it might be slightly skewed, but I'm still releasing with labels for now, and I do still release with small labels. I'm not exclusive to any particular label, and I'm not fussy about only releasing with bigger labels. Obviously, we're talking about smaller labels here. I'm not talking about releasing with Lo-Fi Girl or Sleep Tales or any of the really big labels. I think the pros and the cons of releasing with those would be vastly different. The exposure that you would get from releasing an album or even a single with Lo-Fi Girl, for example, and I think that exposure and the opportunity to get into that label would massively outweigh anything else. I think I've never been in that situation. I hope one day that I could be in that situation, but who knows. At the moment I'm releasing with smaller labels and I do really like it. I can't tell you if it's worth it to release with smaller labels. In my opinion, for Kyo, for my brand, it absolutely is. There is no guaranteed benefits. My biggest song, Looking for Her, which has nearly 1 million streams, is completely independent. That song got on multiple Spotify editorial playlists and is completely independent. There is no label involved in that song at all. So there is no reason to say that you ever need to release with a label. You just need to make a decision for what it is you want to get out of releasing, whether you want to do it with a label or independently. So just to recap, the pros of releasing with a label I see are networking and meeting people. You get kind of a buy-in from someone else. There's their playlists. They might help you submit to playlists, as well as promoting your song or your album on socials, Instagram and TikTok. And then also the fact that they might help you with your Spotify pitches and give you some really cool artwork. And the cons, which I think are slightly bigger, but there is less of them. You obviously have to split the revenue. They do take a cut. I think almost every label takes a cut. There might be some out there that don't. And the fact that you have to release on their timeline, you can't say I want to release on this day and that be it. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Just as a final word, some labels that I've released with that I think are doing really, really cool things. I released with Yawn label. They're really great guys. The same as Homework Radio. They've got a massive YouTube page, which is great. I've also released with Chill Space, who are constantly doing stuff. Get on their Discord. You can get beat battles, compilations. They're really trying to push growing the label. I've also released with Everdream, who are fairly newer but a really, really lovely label and run by another artist that I know. And finally, I've released with a label called Slowdown. They run the website lo-fi.co. They are doing really cool things in the lo-fi scene, so go and check those out. I think that's pretty much it. Peace.